Again, thank you all for being here. This is a very important milestone in each and every one of your lives, as well as your spouses. And so I do want to offer myself and my team as a resource. This is actually my second time being here, and I'm fairly new to this role. I've been in this role maybe about 4 years now, but I do support you all from the Atlanta corporate office. And we have a team of about 43 individuals that work directly with me. We are in office employees, and so we are available Monday through Friday. We have team members that start as early as 7 a.m. in the morning and work up until about 6 p.m. every day. And so we are a high volume group. We process at least 10,000 retiree payments per year. And then that's actually putting individuals into pay. We have over 138,000 individuals across the plans that we administer that are currently receiving a benefit. But again, we are here as a resource to you all, and so available to answer any questions that you may have. All right, so we're going to touch on the IBT plan first. I recognize through the questions that came up today that we have quite a few part-timers in the room as well, so we'll also talk through the specifics of the part-time plan. And then I want to just kind of talk through the retirement calculator as well as the ROL experience. And then for those individuals that don't want to utilize the retirement calculator or the technology, just talk through some of the options available for starting your retirement benefit. All right, so you all are in the room, so I'm assuming that you're eligible for either the IBT plan, which is for our full-timers, or the pension plan, which is for our part-timers, or possibly both. So you have to be covered by the CBA between UPS and IBT. You have to have at least 1 hour of service in covered employment, and covered employment means 1 hour of service as a full-timer to be covered by the IBT plan. And then you could have been a participant in the Central States Pension Fund when UPS withdrew from that fund back in 12/31 of 2007, and you were an active employee as of 1/1/2008. And then I'll kind of just advance ahead here. Participation. So in order to participate in the plan, you have to have at least 750 hours. We talked about being a participant in the Central States Pension Fund. And then again, just 1 hour of service in covered employment following the completion of 1 year of eligible service in which you had earned at least 750 hours. And we'll talk about vesting. So in order to be vested for this particular plan, you have to have at least 750 hours of service for 5 years, and that makes you vested in the plan. What that means is that you have a non-forfeitable right to this benefit, meaning that no one can take this benefit away from you. It is yours. It is an offering that the company is giving to you because you are employees. As well as you do not have to make any contributions to this plan. So there are no employee contributions to this plan, which is a little different from the conversation that we were having with the individual that was here from Empower. Those are contributions that you actually make to that plan. This particular plan, you do not have to make any contributions. All you have to do is show up to work and do your job and become vested, and you have that benefit, and the benefit extends to your significant other. All right, so in order to accrue a benefit in this particular plan, you have to have service credit or either service pension credit. Service credit is based on the number of hours that you work in any calendar year. And so a full year of service credit would be if you work at least 1,800 hours of service in any given year. The second piece to calculating a benefit or accruing a benefit in this plan is service pension credit. So to attain service pension credit, you have to have at least 20 weeks of service pension credit in any given year to receive partial service pension credit for that respective year. And then in order to receive a full year of service pension credit, you have to have at least 40 weeks in covered employment. So what that means is that you have to have at least 1 hour of working hours or either hours in which you were entitled to be paid for in any given week to receive 1 week of service pension credit. Then I'll kind of advance forward. Here is how your normal retirement benefit is calculated. So again, it's calculated based on you obtaining at least 1,801 hours per year for a full year of service credit. And then what happens is for that full year of service credit, there is a accrual rate. And the accrual rate as of 2024, so this means you have an hour of service as of 1/1/2024, that dollar amount in which you will accrue for that respective year is $185. So that's your accrual rate. All right, so I'm not going to touch in each and every one of these benefits types, but I'll talk about the most common ones. So the most common is going to be your normal retirement benefit, and that is based on that service credit that I had just identified. So let's say a individual has, and we'll talk about this on another slide, but let's say that an individual has, as of 2024, moving forward to today, 2 years of service credit. Their normal retirement benefit will be calculated based on the rate of $185 times 2. And then that normal retirement benefit would be the amount that is payable at age 65, because that is the normal retirement age for this particular plan, age 65. So that is the age in which a person would have to work to receive a unreduced benefit for the accrual, which is the normal retirement. And then we have the service pensions. So service pension is based on that service pension credit that we just discussed, which is going to be the 40 weeks to get you a full year of service pension credit. And so this particular plan pays out service pensions as early as age 50 with at least 20 years of service pension credit. And if you are eligible for a service pension at retirement, then that means that dollar amount that is payable to you is a unreduced benefit. So you can receive up to 100% of that benefit as early as age 50 with no reduction. And then there's another component of this plan, which is early retirement. So let's say that when we calculate your benefit at retirement, and your highest benefit actually ends up being the normal retirement benefit, but you decide that you're going to separate from service prior to age 65, then what will happen is that we would calculate an early retirement benefit for you. And the early retirement benefit is subject to early retirement reduction factors, which is about 6% per year for every year you commence on the benefit prior to normal retirement age, unless you meet certain qualifications, which is really that you have 20 years of service credit prior to January 1, 2008. So that means that you were a part of the Central States plan at one point, and then you transitioned over to the IBT plan. So if you fall into those particular parameters, then you can commence on your normal retirement benefit as early as age 62 with no reduction, as long as you have the 20 years of service credit prior to 12/31/2007. All right, so this is an example here, which I kind of touched on briefly, but this is an individual that terminated from employment last year in 2024, and he commenced his benefit as of July 1, 2024 at his normal retirement date. So meaning he was age 65. So in this scenario, he had accrued service prior to 12/31/2007. So Central States reported services over to us. So in this particular scenario, he had accrued a benefit of $965.50 that is going to be payable from Central States at age 65. So for this particular person, immediately when he commences on the benefit, Central States has a portion of the benefit that they will pay to this person. Then here in 2008 through 2018, he had accrued 11 years of service credit in the UPS IBT plan. And so he accrued a benefit of $1,730. And then jumping ahead, 2019 through 2023, 5 years of service credit at a rate of $175. $875 of accrued benefit. And then jumping ahead to 2024, He worked at least half of a year because we said he's separating for service on June 30th. So he had accrued half a year of service credit. So, based on the rate of $185. So, therefore, his UPS IBT plan benefit was $2,697.50. UPS would pay this benefit to this particular individual for his entire lifetime. And then Central States has a portion of the benefit that would be payable to this individual for his lifetime in the amount of $965.50. So the total benefit in this amount payable based on the normal retirement is $3,663 that would be payable to this particular individual for his lifetime. Now, this is the starting point for the benefit. So this is a single life only annuity. We'll get into a bit later in the presentation what would happen for this individual if he or she were married. All right, jumping ahead. So we talked about this a few slides earlier, but this is going to be service pension. And again, this particular chart starts at 25 years of service, but there are service pensions that are payable as early as 50 with 20 years of service. So here you can see this chart starts off 25 years of service, less than age 55. There would be a service pension benefit of $2,400. So that means that this particular individual theoretically has worked 25 years and has earned at least 40 weeks of service pension credit for every year for 25 years, and this person is less than age 55. So the benefit amount would be $2,400. Then this particular plan has an enhancement for those individuals that are 55 and 57. I won't go through that here in detail, but you can see on screen. So let's look at the scenario where we have an individual that has 35 years of service pension credit. In this example, a person less than age 55 would receive a service pension of $4,700. And at age 57, that amount jumps up $600, and that person receives my apologies, at age 55, that dollar amount jumps up $600, and that person would receive a service pension of $5,300. And I do want to be clear on this point. This is not a benefit that you can grow into. So in this example, if a person is separating from service today, the person would need to be 55 with 35 years of service to be eligible for the $5,300. So once you commence on the benefit amount does not change. That's the amount that you will receive for your life. There are no COLA adjustments or anything like that. So this amount is payable forever and ever. But the $5,300 could also be subject to the Central States offset. It's just kind of respective of whether or not someone had accrued a benefit with Central States prior to UPS taking over the plan. All right, so there's also a component of the IBT plan where there's a partial service pension, because there are individuals that could have a career span that went from a part-time insider to a full-time management person back to a driver. So therefore, the company across the three plans will recognize that service and offer a combined service credit. So you have to have at least 25 years of combined service across the 2 or 3 plans to become eligible for a partial service pension. And then you have to have an hour of service on or after January 1, 2008. So meaning you had to be a part of that transfer group. You were at some point a part of Central States Pension Fund, and then you moved over into the IBT plan. So on screen here, we have an individual. We have a calculation for a partial service pension. So in this particular scenario, this person has 31 years of combined service across all plans. And so the 31-year service pension for the IBT plan would pay out $4,900. So in this example, we do a fraction to determine what the benefit amount would be payable from the IBT plan, since this person had not accrued 31 years in just the IBT plan. It's a combination of service. So what we do is we would figure out the numerator of the service pension credit, and we divide that by the denominator. So in this example, this person has 23 years in the IBT plan, 8 years in the pension plan. So that's 31 years of combined service. So you would take the 23 years divided by 31 years of combined service times 4,900, which is the 31-year service pension for someone that is 55, and that would be the dollar amount payable, $3,635, the payment. But outside of that particular option, there are no other benefits for a person that is single. All right, jumping probably ahead to the next. So I think we just kind of briefly talked about this. If a pensioner dies after benefit commences, no further benefits are payable unless, and this is here where we talked about the lifetime with limited survivor spouse option, and that's for someone that selects a SLO or someone that is, so select the SLO, so meaning you're married and you decide that you would like to select a single life only option. The single life only option would be lifetime with limited surviving spouse option, and then we kind of talked through that. This particular form of payment is very unique to the IBT plan. No other plan has this feature. So let's talk about a scenario where someone is married. We talked about on the other slide where the normal form of payment for a married person is one of the joint and survivor options. So if you are married and you elect a SLO, meaning you've spoken with your spouse and your spouse is okay with that, your spouse will have to complete a waiver. And basically they would waive their right to any future benefits that could have been payable to them for the plan. So we'll go through that again when we get to the application process. And that kind of wraps everything up for the IBT plan. So I'm going to stop again for questions respective to what I've shared. Okay. So her question was respective to leave of absences covered by FMLA and whether or not there are any credited services for FMLA. So there is no credited service for the leave of absence reason of FMLA, but there is credited hours for leave of absences for a partial total disability as well as a workers' comp disability. So the plan does provide hours of service if you are on a leave of absence with the reason code of partial total disability or workers' compensation.
Could you just touch on what happens if a married active member dies before they retire?
Yes. So if a married active employee dies before they are retired, there's a provision of the plan that's it's called a QIPSA, but it's a qualified pre-survivor annuity. So in this example, what would happen is that the benefit amount in which the participant had earned, the surviving spouse would be eligible for that amount at 50%. So what the plan would do is calculate the accrued benefit for the participant, and then the surviving spouse would be entitled to 50% of that benefit based on when the person would have been eligible to commence on the benefit.
For how long?
So any annuities that are payable for the lifetime. The only exception to that is kind of how we talked about that death benefit a little bit earlier. But any annuity payments from this particular plan are payable for the lifetime of the participant and their surviving spouse. So he is asking about the SPD that covers the January 1, 2024 period and beyond. And the response to that question is, it is being reviewed with our legal team. We have a draft ready to go. We're just waiting for it to be approved. So the question is about checking the service credit or service pension credit. And there are two ways to check the service credit that someone had accrued. One, you could actually utilize the UPS retirement calculator, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. And the second is you can write into my group, which I will provide some information respective to my group a little bit later as well. So when do you become a participant in the pension plan? One, there's an age requirement for the pension plan. You have to be at least 21 years of age, and you must meet at least 375 hours of service in a given year. And we won't really talk about the requirements prior to August 1, 2013, but present date is you have to have at least 375 hours of service in a year. And then there are 2 dates in a year in which you could become a participant of the plan. That's either January 1 or July 1, whichever is first, after reaching age 21 and attaining 375 hours of service. I won't spend too much time here. You guys are at the retirement point, so I'm assuming that you've all met participation, so let's move forward. We talked about vesting credit a little bit earlier under the IBT plan, but essentially you have to have at least 5 years of vesting credit in order to be entitled to a non-forfeitable right to the benefit, meaning you've accrued this benefit and it can be and it never can be taken away from you from the organization. All right, so here, I think there were a couple of questions earlier respective to service credit. So service credit is based on the number of hours of service and covered employment earned in each calendar year. Service credit is one of the factors that determines the amount of a participant's pension. And a participant earns service credit based on the schedule that is to the right. So if you work less than 750 hours in any given year, you do not receive any service credit for that year. You have to work at least 375 hours of service to receive a partial year of service credit. So the service credit schedule is here on screen. I think someone indicated earlier, what if you work 1,100 or so hours? Well, good, you get a paycheck for it, but you only get a year of service, so just 1 year of service in any given year. If you work 750 hours, you receive 1 year of service credit. There are several types of benefits, but I'll call out a couple here. Normal retirement benefit would be the benefit amount payable at age 65 based on the service credit that is accrued, and we'll get to the accrual rate a bit earlier. There's also a feature of this plan that is an early retirement benefit. The benefit is payable as early as age 50, but subject to reduction factors. The reduction factors are 6% per year for every year that the benefit is commenced prior to age 65. Then we have the service pension benefit, payable as early as age 50, and we'll go through that a bit later, but you have to have at least 25 years of service credit. And then there's the partial service pension benefit, which really is that shared benefit between the IBT plan and the pension plan. I want to call out the required minimum distribution because I think that came up earlier. So for the IBT plan and the pension plan, the required minimum distribution date for the plan specifically is age 70 and a half. There are IRS rules today where the required beginning date is age 73. These plans have not been amended to follow that rule. So what happens is if a person continues to work until they're age 70 and a half, the plan is required to pay out whatever the benefit is that they have accrued as of April 1 in the year following in which the person had reached age 70 and a half. So it doesn't mean that you can't continue to work. All it means is that the plan has to pay the benefit to you based on IRS rules and restrictions. But again, these plans have not been amended to adopt the age 73 rule, which is in place today with the IRS. We are still operating in accordance with the 70 and a half rule from prior to Secure Act 2.0, if that makes sense. I saw you whispering to your husband earlier. I think we were talking about it. So I just wanted to make sure we called out that we have not yet adopted the 73 rule for these particular plans. And so what actually happens is that if someone commences on the required minimum distribution and are still actively employed, they're going to go through an application process. And when they go through that application process and select whatever the optional form of payment that they are, so meaning they select one of the single life annuities or the joint and survivor spouse annuities, that benefit amount is payable for the lifetime. It does not change. So meaning when the person actually decides that they want to separate from service, they would not get another opportunity to reapply for the benefit. So if a person decides to continue to work beyond age 70 and a half, they just kind of need to be thoughtful about what type of optional form of payment they select, because there's not going to be another option at true retirement, which is when you actually have that separation of service, to change your optional form of payment. All right, so I think a little bit earlier we were talking about the service pension benefit. So this is the chart for the service pension benefit. If you have accrued 25 years of service credit, you can separate from service with a service pension amount of $1,450, and then just kind of looking down the chart. But this is going to be the chart for the service pension benefit. And so I think he had asked the question earlier respective to if the person had accrued 24.5 years of service credit, then you would not be entitled to a service pension. You have to get to that 25-year of service credit threshold to be able to receive the service pension. So what happens is that at retirement, we would calculate the benefit amount that would be payable to someone based on the normal accrual as well as the service pension, and that person would get the greater of the two amounts. Yes.
Just a question. I'm in my 36th service year. I got 33.75 vested years. When I went on the retirement calculator, it's only showing me credit of $2,100 for the 30 years until I project it out to May 1st of 2027.
That's right, because you have to get to the 35-year in order to get the 35-year pension. So there's no adjusted amount between 30 and 31 or 30 and 33. You have to actually get to the 35. What happens I don't, I'll probably touch on what you're going to ask me. So let's say you're at 32 years, right? So So in this example, the service pension amount payable would be $2,100. But what we also do is calculate what your normal retirement benefit would be. And so if you have 32 years of service, you guys today I think have an accrual rate of $65. So we would calculate whatever your normal retirement benefit is, which gives you those additional 2 years and on up to 35, and then you would get whatever the greater of the two is. Okay. Well, we're happy to have you stay. All right, and then again, we kind of talked about this a bit earlier, but there's also a feature for this particular plan with the partial service pension. Very similar calculation to the partial service pension for the IBT plan. So I'll just kind of advance forward. All right, here we talked about the IBT rate. The rate today is $65, and this just shows the history of the different rates for the IBT plan. And again, this is how your normal retirement benefit is calculated based on this particular accrual rate for the respective time periods. All right, I'm going to stop there and see if I have any questions about the pension plan before we go into the next piece. Yes. So the question is, if you had accrued some service in the pension plan and then later accrued service in the IBT plan, how does that benefit payment work? So the plans operate separate. There are two different plans. So if you had in this example, a partial service pension that was payable from the IBT plan, we would consider your service in that calculation in which you accrue under the UPS pension plan, and we would also consider the service that you accrued under the IBT plan. I think we had an example up a little bit earlier, but the benefit in that example would be payable from the IBT plan. Independently, we would also calculate your benefit from the pension plan, and we would also consider your years of service under the IBT plan for that particular partial service pension if you're eligible, and then those deposits will be independent of each other. They will be deposited into your account. You know, it'll look like one payment, but they're paid from two different plans. And so her question was respective to when someone that is actively employed has to begin their required minimum distributions. And the answer to her question is that benefit is payable April 1st following the year in which the person reaches age 70 and a half. So the question is whether or not if you're a UPS employee, I'm going to assume part-timer, so you would be considered you would have eligibility for the pension plan in a sense because you're a part-timer. However, you can't meet participation. In order to meet participation, you have to be at least age 21. So in that example, the person will not be a participant until they reach age 21 and work at least 375 hours, and they have to meet the entry date requirement of January or July 1. So the question was, how accurate is the UPS retirement calculator, and whether or not it basically considers a person's entire service profile. And the response to that question is yes. It's actually the exact same system that we utilize internally to calculate the benefit. And the majority of the time, it is more beneficial to a participant to utilize that retirement calculator because it's a immediate quick response. Whereas if you write into my group, then there could be a bit of a delay because we have to have a case open and then assign it to a processor. And so the best and most immediate an effective thing to do is to utilize the retirement calculator. Now, if you're using the retirement calculator and you identify any discrepancies, that is when you would want to write into the group directly so we can take an independent review of the profile and make sure there's no adjustments that we need to make on our end. All right, so here is going to be the benefit request form, and this is going to be the form that someone would submit to our group if they are not utilizing the retirement calculator. So this particular form is available via UPSers, and it's also available on the retirement calculator. You would just download the form. Very basic, your name, some demographic information, spousal information, termination date, proposed or anticipated termination date, as well as the benefit start date. And then this particular document can be submitted directly to my group. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but we have a 1-800 number in which we have a team of 43 individuals that are associated with this particular number, and we also have a email. It's retirement@ups.com. I think Central States had some information up, but I don't believe it had the correct email address. So if you would just kind of take note of this particular slide, because Central States had the incorrect email address up on their slide. All right, so this is the retirement calculator. And we actually refreshed this particular calculator back in October of 2024. So it looks a bit different than what it had looked in the past. And if you have not yet utilized the retirement calculator, you are going to be prompted. So if you have not yet tried to utilize the calculator after October of 2024, you're going to be prompted to register for the site. And when you register for the site, you will also be prompted to go through a multi-factor authentication process. And then you'll also be asked to authenticate yourself through some LexisNexis questions. So there is a process in which you'll have to go through when you initially gain access to the site if you have not tried to utilize it post-October of 2024. But this is the site here. Up at the top, you can see retirement data, retire online resources, and then we have where you can estimate your benefit. If you were to click on that button, that would allow you to run, one second, I remember. That's gonna allow you to run real-time estimates of your benefit based on the date in which you state you want to separate from service and start the benefit. So the question was, I'm assuming you separated from service and came back as a rehire. And in this example, I'm assuming you did not receive a cash out of the benefit for that time period. And so, yes, the retirement calculator will capture that service from prior history as long as you had not yet received a distribution for whatever that short period of time was. Okay, so on this particular screen, again, this is a refresh look and feel, but if a person was to click on personal information, they would be able to identify all of the information that we have on file for the individual. For an active person, they cannot actually make any updates on this screen, so it's view purposes only. Take a look and make sure your information is correct. If it is not correct, then you have to go down this independent path of making the proper adjustments via Workday. The next line is retirement data. So if a person was to click on that particular hyperlink, it will take you to a page where you can review all of the information respective to your independent retirement plan. So if you click on that, you will see the information for your IBT plan benefit or your pension plan benefit. There's also a little there's also some information on that particular page that actually identifies the date that we're processed through. So pension processing tends to be about 2 months delayed. So for example, today we are in September, the end of September. So we've processed data through the end of July so far. So we're a couple of months behind with processing. And so I think that was kind of alluding back to the question about whether or not if a person is on leave of absence, will they see that additional service respective to that leave? And it all really depends on timing, especially if it's in the current year because of us being delayed in processing. All right, and then resources. So I think a gentleman over here had asked a question about whether or not the new summary plan description was available, and we are working on that. But as of today, if a person were to go out here to the retirement calculator, you can pull down the most recent summary plan description that we have, which pretty much provides you with a summary of the provisions of the plans in which you are eligible for. All right, so spoke about this briefly. But again, here, this is going to be where we talked about that retirement data. Here you can see a screenshot of the service as of date. So we probably pulled this back in June because this shows us processed through March of 31, 2025. So this person was the IBT plan. If the person had eligibility in the pension plan, they would be able to see all the retirement data for both of those plans. And if they were in any other plans that are administered by my group, they will be able to see that detail here as well. From this same screen, a individual can go into the system and add a beneficiary, so add a spouse as a joint annuitant. You can also estimate your benefit, and if eligible to commence on the benefit, you can start the Retire Online process. And then here again, back to the question about the hours of service. If you look down at the bottom, you'll see year-to-date hours. So those are the hours that this person has in the system as of the last process date for us. So this person had 456.49 hours as of March 31, 2025. But all of this information is available via the retirement calculator in real time as of the date in which we're processed through. All right, so this is now going to start getting into someone that is retirement eligible. So meaning you've met whatever the provisions are for the respective plans that you participate in, you can actually retire online. So on screen here, it just states that our records indicate you're eligible to retire online. You can complete the process 60 to 90 days prior to your plan benefit start date. And this is very important to note. We talked about a bunch of different items respective to your benefits, and so one being your health care. So what happens is that when you start the retirement application process at least 60 to 90 days prior to your benefit start date, it gears up other processes. So it gears us up to start sending data over to Central States for your eligibility for health care. And it kind of avoids you being delayed in processing so that everything kind of happens cohesively. You separate from service, your retiree health care starts timely. And so that's why we kind of ask for you to apply for the benefit at least 60 to 90 days prior to the benefit start date. The IBT plan has a special provision. So meaning I separate from service today, I neglect to submit my application. And I can submit my application next year, which is a year later, for a benefit start date of October 1 of 2025. Because with the IBT plan, there's the ability to apply for a retroactive annuity start date as long as you have separated from service, and you can kind of request a retroactive annuity start date back to a year after you had separated from service. The pension plan does not allow for that provision, but I do wanted to call that particular item out because we do have individuals that separate from service and apply for a retroactive annuity start date. You can't do that via the retirement calculator because once you separate from service, the active view of the retirement calculator, meaning this retire online feature, is no longer available. So for a person to retire online, you have to separate from active service and begin the process. All right, so this kind of just walks through what we would expect a person to do to be able to really complete the retire online process seamlessly. Review your personal information, review, update spousal joint annuitant, estimate your benefit, and provide your tax withholding, tax ACH information. All right, so this is just a screenshot of starting the retirement calculator process. This particular person had a last day, he entered in his last day of employment, reviewed his personal data. The number 3 would have been him performing the pension calculation, meaning he identified the date of termination, identified the benefit start date. The system has calculated the benefit and demonstrated some options available to him. Then number 4 would have just been some notices that are required for, so some disclaimers respective to the retirement calculator. And then item number 5 would have been pension options. So this is where a person would select the optional form of payment that they would like to receive at retirement. And then the last step is just kind of review all of the information and submit to our group. What happens after the information is submitted to our group via this ROL process is that it opens up an independent case. With opening up that independent case, it's going to be a calculation review. So then my team takes a look at all of the calculations that the system has performed, and we make sure that it is accurate, and then we approve the calculation. Independently, what we expect a participant to do after they submit their ROL elections is to print the confirmation statement, which is essentially confirming that you've submitted the Retire Online election. You sign that document, and then you send that over to us along with supporting documents. Supporting documents would be a marriage license for someone that is married, driver's license for both the participant as well as the surviving spouse. And then you would also want to provide us with your ACH and tax forms. For a married person that has decided that they are going to select a single life only annuity, that person would also have to submit a waiver. It's very important that the waiver is submitted with the packet, because essentially what happens is the spouse has to get this document notarized and says that, hey, I affirm and authorize that my spouse is not going to leave me a benefit. So if my spouse passes away, predeceases me, I understand that I'm not going to have a benefit payable. You take all of those documents and then you submit it to our group. And essentially what happens is that we approve and authorize the transaction, we set up the payment, and then we send a confirmation letter. That same confirmation letter was indicated, I think, in the presentation for full-time health care as well as part-time health care. So that confirmation basically is affirmation that the person has separated from service and now they're ready to move on with the retiree health care. And I'll just kind of jump ahead to the next screen. So this is a new feature of the retirement calculator, where now a participant can upload that packet that we just discussed, meaning you've completed your ROL election. You now have your confirmation statement as well as all supporting documents. What you would do is visit the retirement activity page and you would upload that complete packet. And so it's really pretty much high touch for the participant, where they're uploading that packet and interacting with us directly online. And then again, we would just approve that retirement packet, and then we would send the confirmation statement. And I'll stop there for any questions on the Retire Online process. The question was whether or not the calculator was available for someone that is on a disability. The calculator is available for a person that is on a disability, so you should not have any issues with utilizing the retirement calculator today. So if a person does not want to utilize the Retire Online feature, they would send us this benefit request form, again, at least 60 to 90 days prior to benefit start date. And then we would send a paper application out once we process the case. And the paper application would come out via UPS 2-day air. And then we would expect the person to send us back that completed application along with all supporting documents via mail. And we would essentially process the paper application and put the person in pay. It's a very similar process to the ROL. The only difference is that you're interacting with us via a paper application versus the system. For someone that has a quadro, you do not have access to Retire Online. And so for a person that has a quadro, we would expect for the person to send us the requested application at least request for application at least 60 to 90 days prior to the benefit start date. But for someone with a quadro, I would expect that we would have already been in communications, because generally we would need the order to ensure that we're properly segregating the benefit before we can go down the application path. But a person that has a quadro cannot retire online. What you can do if you have a quadro is you can utilize the retirement calculator, meaning you can estimate your benefit. However, the amount that would be presented as your accrued benefit does not include the quadro offset. So we would have not segregated any benefits for someone that has a quadro that have utilized the retirement calculator. So the question is whether or not I stated the credited hours for part-time, and it's 190 hours for the short-term disability per month. The question was about two different deposits. So respective to if a person is a participant in two different plans, if that person elects to receive a paper check, then you will receive two checks. If you elect for direct deposit, then you will have the deposit. But again, it's payable from two different plans. Yes. So the question was whether or not you work more than 1,801 hours for a person that is eligible for the IBT plan, whether or not you can receive more than 1 year of service prorated, on any hours greater than 1,801. And the question is no, you can only receive 1 year of service in any year. So if you work more than 1,801 hours, you can only receive 1 year of service. The question was whether or not she could utilize the retirement calculator because at some point in her history, she was on a workers' comp. The answer to that question is a person that is active today you can certainly use the retirement calculator. Whether or not you were on a workers' comp in the current year would be the situation, I'm assuming, because we would need to calculate whatever your eligible hours are for that year. And so if a person has not yet separated from service, we wouldn't necessarily have calculated for that workers' comp. But if you're asking about a workers' comp from a prior year, then we should have the service for that. As long as it's in your history. Is it in your history?
I don't know why it wouldn't be.
Okay.
But they could not find it in the history.
So that's the problem, is that we don't see it in your history. Okay, so the question was whether or not there's any benefit to non-credited service, and I'm not really sure how to answer that other than this. In order for your benefit to be calculated to get to 25 years, you have to have credited service. So you have to have hours of work. And so you would need to get to the 375 hours to even get to a benefit that would be credited based on 25 years of service. Yes, so the question was how the benefit is calculated based on credited service. So for example, a person as of August 1, 2023 has a benefit amount of $65. If that person gets 10 years of service from 2023 forward, the benefit will be calculated 65 times 10 years, which gets you to whatever that amount is. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. I appreciate your questions, great questions, and hope you all have a happy and wonderful retirement.